everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's webinar to my former self. I'm Laura Namuskai, and I'm an engineer at Network Rail, and I'm also part of the Northeast Young Rail Professionals Committee. Tonight, Ollie, can you please change the next slide? Thank you. Tonight we have two great speakers, Anna Jane Hunter and Nina Lockwood, who are going to talk to us about their career and some of the lessons they learned along, and hopefully we'll all learn something new tonight and be inspired. Can you change the slide, please? This is the first event out of the series of 4 that we have this month, and they're all on Wednesday evenings, and you can see on the slide the next 3 ones. Young Rail Professional is an organization that aims to inspire, promote, and develop the next generation of railway professionals. And hopefully you will get more involved in the next few months and even joining future events or maybe even our committee. If you have any questions throughout the talk, please use the question panel on the side, and we're gonna use them later. Now, if Nina is ready, we can start the first chat. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Lorena. Hi, everybody. I hope you've had a good day. I've had a pretty good one. I've been looking forward to presenting to the Young Rail Professionals. And thank you to Oliver for the invitation. So in terms of advice for my former self or my younger self, there's quite a lot, I guess, and I tried to structure it so that I didn't do my usual rambling off, and I gave it you in some semblance of order. So I've got 20 minutes and I'm going to give you 10 in 20. So 10 tips from me in the next 20 minutes in terms of things that I wish I'd known earlier and things that I think are really important because the world of work has changed quite a bit since I came into it. I bet some of you weren't even born when I started work, so which is a scary thought, quite honestly. So let's head off with number 1. What's your passion? So find out what you love to do is my number 1 top tip in terms of your career. It can be your passion. If you're not happy with that word, it can be your why. Simon Sinek has written a great book and done a great TED talk on finding your why. What's your why? It's about when you're in flow. Do you know when you're doing something, when you've got an activity on the go, when you're involved in a piece of work and you're deeply engrossed in it, you just don't know that the time's going. What kind of things are you doing? What kind of things, when you wake up in the morning and you know you've got that in your diary for that day, what kind of things are you doing? Find your passion and then find a job that enables you to follow your passion. However, don't stress if you don't know it yet. So I reckon I was probably in my late 20s before I discovered what really made me tick. So it's important to try different stuff. You sometimes you don't know. You've got to try a few different things. You've got to do a few different roles. I was in my late 20s when I found out that my absolute passion, what I'm fascinated by and what I'm interested in is people. That's my thing. So as the founder and director of Intuitive, it's all about the people. It's about we're a recruitment company. I work with clients who are people. I find out about their businesses. It's so interesting. And I find out I get to have the most amazing conversations with our candidates who have got great careers. They've done really interesting things. So for me, that's a great day. That's what makes up a great day and a great week. So number 1, what's your passion? What's your why? And don't stress if you don't know it yet. Just keep trying a few different things and it will click. Number 2, you be you. Or as Oscar Wilde put it, be yourself because everyone else is taken. This is, for me, really, really key. And again, when I look back in my early career, I'm very conscious of looking at other people and thinking, well, I need to be more like that person. I need to behave more like that person. I need to speak more like that person. So I think what's really important as I've gone further on in my career is to learn to speak my own language. Some of that actually, and confession here, sharing some personal stuff with you, is about accent. I obviously have got a northern accent, and I didn't used to want to have a northern accent. I thought that people were judging me because of it. I didn't sound posh enough, I wasn't eloquent enough. And so, but it took a move up to Glasgow actually, and part of my career spent with the Royal Bank of Scotland up in Glasgow, which I absolutely loved. Then people were saying to me, oh, I love your accent. And I thought, you know what, I love yours as well. So this really started to dawn on me that accents are great because they're part of an individual, they're part of you. Another aspect with that is what I call consultancy speak. So I don't speak that. I really try hard not to slip into the jargon, although we do love that in the rail industry, obviously. But again, being in meetings and people using all the big words, the kind of fancy project management speak, whatever, and I used to feel really intimidated by it. I like to keep it simple. So speak your own language, be yourself, own it, be authentic, you be you. It's all about your personal brand, and there's so much. Personal brand is woven into everything that I'm sharing with you this evening. So yes, there's an expression of fake it till you make it, and that for me is linked with the imposter syndrome. Some of you might have come across that, and that's the feeling that we used to think it was just women, but actually it isn't, it's everybody. Sometimes we'll have that feeling, the majority of people will at some point in their career have that feeling that I'm not really as good as everyone thinks I am. I'm going to get found out, and I've just got away with it up until now. So the advice from a lot of self-development books and webinars, etc., is to fake it till you make it. So just keep practicing, and ultimately you'll get there. So absolutely, if that helps. But for me, ultimately, be true to yourself, be authentic, because it shows. Number 3, find your voice. So following on from the above, in terms of being yourself and speaking your own language, find your voice and express yourself. And that's in person, it's on social media, it's in a conference, for example. Express yourself, take the risk to speak up, ask a question of the speaker, share an idea with a colleague, and your voice, as I say, is also on social media. So people get to know that voice, they get to know that that's your tone, that's how you speak, that's the kind of stuff that you share, again, part of your personal brand. So find your voice, don't be afraid to speak up, and just do little practice bits if that helps in the first instance. But we all know that feeling, I'm sure, of being in a meeting or being in a situation and you're so conscious that you're the only one around the table who hasn't spoken yet, and then the pressure starts building. So my top tip there is just do it as soon as you get in there. Make sure you've got something appropriate to say, obviously, but say something, speak up. Number 4, the opposite of that is listen. For me, absolutely huge key skill that very few people in the overall scheme of things have been able to master. I remember being told years ago, or being on a training course or reading a book, and the expression being used that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio. And so many people are so keen to kind of get their point across, get one to speak, that the listening bit gets forgotten about. I was actually on the phone earlier to one of the most senior people in our industry, Nick Donovan at Northern, and I asked Nick. I told him I was sharing some stuff with you all this evening, and I asked him what his top tip would be, and his actually was listening. Listen to people all the time, listen to people on the front line, listen to other people's opinions, and so listen more, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen better. So you might be listening, but are you hearing? And somebody shared a tip with me a long time ago now, that in order to practice the listening, listen to the radio and listen to articles or items on the radio that you're not necessarily that interested in. And so my job a few years ago involved spending a lot of time in the car, and I had Radio 4 on, and the number of programmes I've listened to about fishing, I can't begin to tell you. It's a subject I'm not necessarily that interested in, but it really helped me to practice my listening. So listen more, listen better, pay attention, and remember, because people like to be listened to. It's an amazing feeling when you know that somebody is tuned into you and you feel that they're interested, they're paying attention. It's a really great feeling to give to somebody else. We can quite often be guilty of waiting to speak. Do you know that point where somebody says something and you think, oh, I've got something exciting I want to share here, let me in, kind of, but they're still speaking. You've stopped listening because you're waiting to chip in. Be aware of that. Keep some great eye contact, minimize the distractions, be in the room, in the moment with that person. So top skill, number 4, listen. Honestly, it's a career skill. Number 5, another big one, networking. I had no idea at all early in my career how fundamental this is to business and career success. I cannot tell you, I cannot express it strongly enough that networking is really what propels a career. It's all about relationships, and a network of relationships are a key part of career business success, absolutely, without a doubt. When I used to go to networking events many moons ago, I would pitch up. I would distinctly remember going to a Chamber of Commerce event in Manchester, and it seemed to be about how many business cards can you give out and how many business cards can you collect back in again. And I didn't enjoy that. It didn't feel real. It felt really fake. It's kind of, we're not engaging, we're not having a conversation, we're just literally kind of, oh, here's one of my cards, right, and then I'll move off to the next person. So I changed my approach and I just let go of the pressure. There was, I just told myself, go along, you will learn something. You'll meet somebody that will teach you something, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a more of a difficult learning process, but ultimately I think that if you go into a networking situation, quite a lot of people are worried about them. We're not comfortable. Clearly, we're not doing it at the moment anyway, so we're all getting a bit out of practice. I don't think that it comes necessarily very comfortably to anybody. And I still walk into a room now and have a bit of a, right, where am I going? Who do I know? Where can I go? Who can I go and speak to? So I think it's something where you just need the practice. Don't put the pressure on yourself. Go and find someone that makes eye contact, engages with you in some way, someone you know, even better. But the whole ethos of networking, seek to add value first. So I think if anyone goes along to a networking event to get something out of it, to kind of get a meeting or to get a sale or whatever it is in whatever context, then it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be enjoyable in my view. But I think if you can seek to add value, what can you share? Who can you introduce that person to? What do you know that might be of benefit to them? So I really believe that the most successful people value people over tasks, and networking is all about relationships with people. Being out there, so whether that's out there physically, in the old world when we used to go out and shake people's hands and have name badges on, or this new world where we're on webinars, we're talking to people, we're kind of engaging on LinkedIn, which I'll talk about shortly. So networking is key, can't stress it enough. It helps you to build an external reputation, so not just within your organisation, but beyond it in the wider industry, and potentially even beyond that, with other people who may be at a particular event that you've gone to, for example, or on a webinar. It helps you to raise your profile. People need to know that you're out there. They need to know who you are, what you stand for, what job you do, how you do it. By doing that, it broadens your career options. The more people that know who you are, what you do and where you're working now, the better chance you've got of being approached for new and exciting opportunities. It's a good way of swapping ideas. It's a way of generating innovation, and it's an enriching experience. You will always learn something without a shadow of a doubt. Number 6, LinkedIn. I've kind of put Twitter in brackets after this, so it's social media. You need a presence on social media. Now, going back to the dark ages when I started my career, none of this was around, but it is becoming increasingly important over certainly the last 5 years, if not a bit longer. LinkedIn in particular, you need a presence so people can get to know you and to get to know what you're about. Twitter and LinkedIn are a bit of a warm-up act. I've lost count of the number of times now when I've turned up at an event and somebody said, "Oh, hi Nina, how are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm great. I don't know you. Who are you?" And they say, "Oh, I've seen you on Twitter," or "I saw that post that you did on LinkedIn." So it's kind of people start to get to know you before they've even met you. So it's like a warm-up act. So produce content, make sure you're posting. It's an investment of time, and I think that the most successful people in this area make an allowance for that in their day. So they'll set aside half an hour to read the posts, to comment on the posts, to actually produce content themselves. It will help you to expand your network. You connect with other people that you think may be interesting. They might have something interesting to say that's relevant to your career, to the job that you're doing. It gives you the opportunity to showcase your knowledge. So obviously your own posts do that, but your comments on other people's posts do that too. And that gets you kind of more prominence in terms of these brilliant algorithms that LinkedIn works with. And it helps you to learn about your industry. There's loads of groups on there, there's specialist groups, there are people that will be sharing information that is relevant to you. So you need a presence on social media, and you will more than likely be contacted by headhunters. My advice to you there is always have a conversation. There is no commitment. It'll be interesting for you to find out what people are approaching you about, what types of jobs. And as you go through your career, those relationships with recruiters and headhunters will actually be really positive for you in terms of understanding the market, understanding where the opportunities are. So I would always say, of course I wouldn't I, but I would always say, if someone tries to engage with you in that way on LinkedIn, then go for it. Just have a conversation, because there's no obligation or commitment. Number 7, keep learning. Read books, go on webinars, talk to people, have a mentor. That's a great way of learning and expanding your knowledge. But don't forget to use what you learn. There's a definite period in my career where I was reading books all the time, just had a book on the go constantly, sometimes 2 or 3 books on the go. But unless you actually put what you're learning into action, then it doesn't make a lot of difference. But there's lots of evidence out there to suggest that people who read on a consistent basis for half an hour a day are more successful in their careers. And Bill Gates has said exactly that. So I think on basis of success, then he's ticking a number of boxes. So if Bill does it, then I see no reason why we shouldn't be. And in terms of learning, remember that even the bad stuff that you go through in terms of your career, and I've certainly had a couple of jobs in my time that have been more challenging than others. I've had jobs where I've come home and cried my way home because of somebody I worked with, or, you know, different situations that you're in. Even the bad stuff, when you move on in your career, you can look back and you can see what you learned from that. So even the bad experiences are good learning opportunities. Number 8, a bit of a kind of oxymoron: say yes, but don't be afraid to say no. So one of my friends, her mum, Enid, she is in her 80s. She lost her husband a couple of years ago, and she said to me, "My advice to you, Nina, and what I'm doing moving forward is say yes to everything." So for her, she just wants to get involved in everything. If someone asks her, do you know what, do you want to go out? Do you want to go on this trip? Do you want to go on this holiday? Whatever, she's saying yes to everything. So that stretches your comfort zone. It gets you to do stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and sometimes that's scary, and I think I'm a big advocate of doing something scary every now and again just to stretch, you know, a YRP webinar or something. Take some risks. We've all got our own threshold in terms of risk taking. I work for myself, I've got my own business, so I've got a really kind of high risk threshold. I'm willing to put myself out there, but you know, make it all relative, but take some risks, do something uncomfortable. But you also need to be prepared to say no, because sometimes it's not the right thing, and you know it's not the right thing, and saying no is fine. Otherwise we end up with no hours left in the day. We're doing stuff that we don't want to do. So learning to say no, I'm still working on it personally, but it's a good skill to have. Number 9, trust your intuition. And this links in with learning to say no and what you say yes to. So your intuition, that little voice in your head, the feeling in your stomach that is telling you, does this feel good or does it feel not so good? Friend of mine uses this great expression whenever you've got something big to think about, a decision to make, something that you need to kind of give some great thought to, sit with it. Sit with the question and listen to your intuition, to your gut instinct, and you will know what to do. But we've got to stop. We've got to be still. We've got to sit with it. We've got to listen to what our intuition is telling us. Trust it. This again, big learning for me as I've gone through my career. I've got to understand how amazing my intuition is. That's the reason the business is called what it is. Number 10, have fun. Have fun doing it, because you're at work a very long time, and not every day is going to be great. Some days will definitely be better than others, but it's really important to kind of see, have some fun, enjoy what you're doing. If you're not, then you need to be looking for something else, because life, quite frankly, is just too short. So that's the top 10 tips for you. I think I'm up to my 20 minutes. I'm going to share one more thing with you as a little Brucey bonus. I have this on the wall in front of my desk, and some top advice is don't half-arse anything. If it's worth doing, it will require your whole arse. Apologies if that has offended anyone, but it's just a motto to live by. So what I'm doing now is exactly what I was meant to do all along, and the path that I've taken to get there has been the preparation for that. Even the stuff that I wouldn't want to do again, the stuff that wasn't that enjoyable when I was in it, it all takes you to where you need to be. Hopefully something in there has struck a chord with some of you, and hopefully you've learned something. Very happy to take any questions either later on or via LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. That was really helpful. I don't know about anyone else, but I definitely do have little post-it notes up here what you're saying. So thank you very much. And we have a few questions for you, but we'll keep them for the end if that's all right. So we'll have next Anna Jane Hunter, if she's ready to go.
Hi, is that working?
Hello. Yeah, it is. You ready to go then?
Yeah, ready to go. Ready to try and follow that. So Nina and I are quite often on bills together doing Women in Rail stuff, which I'm pleased all of us included our logo on tonight's webinar. So yeah, my name's Anna Jane Hunter and I am Director for North of England Rail at Network Rail, but also Chair of Women in Rail for the North West, but with a good North East accent. So hopefully I'm all right at home tonight. So yeah, following Nina, but also I'm told I'm following Andrew Haynes, who did the most recent YRP event yesterday. So I'm not used to following Andrew on a bill, but I have filled in as a cheap replacement for him once at an event, and that went all right. So hopefully this will too. Bit of a mixture from me. So almost heading on for 14 years in the rail industry now. My advice might be a little bit more specific to rail, but hopefully generic enough to suit everyone. I'll start with a practical piece of advice from my first job when I was recently off the graduate scheme at Network Rail, and that is to beware of the CC button. It also applies in the modern era to Nina's comments about Twitter. Twitter's a wonderful thing, but you do have to be careful. So I'll tell you a little embarrassing story to get me into the comfort of speaking to you. when I was in my first job, I accidentally clicked CC to an email to all, which was me having a whinge about the managing director of a company called First Engineering, which I think doesn't exist anymore, so it's quite safe to talk about it, but one of the big engineering firms in the rail industry at the time. And I said something like, he's got to be fucking joking, hasn't he, in an email that went to everyone, including him. So read it back, look at whether you've clicked on CC or just replied to the person you meant to, and then send. So same with Twitter, just have a little think about what you're saying before you say it. If you're doing it in a professional capacity in particular, just be aware of that. You may even have policies at the company that you work for that mean you shouldn't say certain things on social media. It's a platform we all need to be aware of, but just be careful. It caught someone else out a couple of years ago, who I won't mention, but it was pretty sticky for a minute. So that's a practical one. A little bit of practical advice as well that my dad, who also worked in the rail industry for over 40 years, gave me, which is really relevant to people in YRP, is just try and be decent to everybody that you work with. You won't be best friends with everyone. You won't love every boss that you have or love everybody that works with you, but you just never know who you're going to end up working with. It's a huge industry in UK rail and increasingly globally in rail, but it's surprisingly small. So the person that you don't particularly like or get on with could one day either be your boss, or you could be their boss, or you could be working on a project with them. So it just pays to it's a very simple piece of advice. And, you know, if you're a nice person, if you're a good person, it might sound simple. Sometimes it's tempting to fall out with people, and it's just worth at all costs trying not to, because you just never know when they might pop up again in your career. Speaking of things popping up, another piece of practical advice which I've learned over the years in the rail industry, linking to it's a small industry, is that we're quite incestuous. So as well as my dad working on the industry, I have married into the industry as well. So my husband works in rail, and we don't share a surname. Be careful. Be careful of surnames that are the same, because if the surnames are the same, people might be related. So again, just careful what you say. And careful what you say anyway, because people like me don't necessarily have the same surname as their spouse, or indeed their father, or whatever it might be, and you just never know. 6 degrees of separation in the rail industry can be so dangerous, and many people have been caught out by it. So again, a bit of practical advice, just be careful what you put in an email or what you say, even in the pub, because you just never know. So on to a bit more of linking into what Nina said, which by the way was brilliant, and I always listen intently to what Nina tells me, but I've made extensive notes because I'm still learning, and I definitely found some things there. And some of the things I'm going to tell you now, I haven't necessarily followed to the letter, but it's things that I think maybe other people have told me that either I wish I'd done more of, or I would just like to pass on to someone. And the first one is be a crab. So don't be obsessed with moving up the grades, up the career ladder in a really linear way. Be like a crab and move around a bit. So get different experience, whether that's different areas of your current business or whether that's moving in different bits of the industry. In the first week that I joined Network Rail, we sat in Westwood, which any of you who work at Network Rail know used to be a lot nicer than it is now. And we were in the auditorium, and Ian Coucher, who was the big boss at Network Rail at the time, said to us, as a group of graduates, 27 of us, general management graduates, I want you to leave. He said, I want you to leave Network Rail, and I want you to come back. And at the time, we all sat there going, oh my God, he wants us to leave. But what he meant by that was it's really valuable to learn things from other businesses, other teams, other environments, and then bring it back. And actually, any good business, any good boss should be flattered if people want to leave and go do something better and then bring it back again. And the key thing is to want to come back. So they should always be encouraging you to do that, and you should be brave enough to do that. And basically, quite practically speaking, don't just chase the salary, because it can be quite tempting to go for an increase in your salary. And don't we all love money? Of course we do, but it might not be the best move in the long run. So just think about that crab movement a little bit. And specifically, what that can mean is the decision between becoming a technical specialist and ending up in, you know, somewhat of a cul-de-sac where all you can do is improve the technical ranking of your skill set, versus if you do have any desire to be more of a generalist and thinking really long term, If you want to be an MD of a talk, or if you want to be, in the top echelons of Network Rail, or you want to run an engineering business, if you want to be right at the top, you need to be more than just a technical specialist. Nina mentioned Nick Donovan earlier, and I've had the pleasure of working for Nick when he was an MD, but his background is as an engineer, a fleet engineer. But all of the best engineers that I've ever worked with and who I've ever seen make it to something other than a top engineer, the reason they do it, and it applies to accountants as well, it applies to other technical specialists, is because they're not just a technical specialist. And it links with what Nina said. What they are is good with people, good with relationships, things like managing difficult trade union conversations. You can't do that if you are just a technical specialist. So by all means, nurture and progress your technical side, but also think about, if you do want to go higher in your career path in that way, you need to broaden your skill set, and that people bit is massively important. Another thing that Nina said that resonated with me and I was going to mention was about mentors, people you find inspiring. Find people who you work for or with, or you read things that they write that inspire you, but don't aspire to be them. So I think Nina said something about finding your own voice and that kind of thing. For me, the people who've really inspired me, it's the way they do things and the way they do business, the way they deal with people. That's what inspires me. But I don't aspire to be like them. I just want to take what I learned from them and try and implement it in the way that I do things. So for me, the best person I've ever worked with was a wonderful man called Gary Openshaw, who was an area general manager at Network Rail years ago. He sadly passed away very suddenly. And he inspired me because he's the kind of guy who leads his team in a way that makes you want to march over the hill into battle. Don't question what he's saying. It's the right thing because Gary said it. And to me, I find that massively inspiring. So I try to be like that as a leader when I'm leading people. So for me, that works. Find what inspires you and don't aspire to be them. Just take the qualities. Nina spoke about saying yes and saying no, and I was also going to mention that. It's good that we're aligned here. Hopefully that'll come across in the Q&A as well. My way of putting that would be say yes, ask questions later. So if somebody comes to you with a project, a secondment opportunity, something, and they're asking you to do it because they think you've got the right skill set, just say yes. Even if you think, and again, it's something that we say a lot, is a female trait that females often think they need to be able to do 100% of the job before they'll apply for it or say yes. But I find this applies to a lot of guys too. It's not just a female thing. Don't worry about whether you know 100% how to do it or you've done it before or whatever. Just say yes and you'll figure it out and it'll be okay. 99% of the time it'll be okay and you'll learn something from it, even if it's, like Nina said, might be a bad experience, but you learn something anyway. So say yes, ask questions later. But say no, and this is a specific one linking to Women in Rail, because I've got to get some references in there to my other cause. Do speak up. And one thing I wish I had done more of as a young manager is if people keep asking you to make coffee or ask you where the refill for the photocopy paper is, do say no. Do definitively say no, that is not my job. Just because I'm a woman who sits near the photocopier doesn't mean I know how the damn thing works. I don't. And by the way, I make pretty crappy coffee because I drink black coffee. So if anybody wants anything else, it's pretty naff. Do speak up about that and don't be self-deprecating. That would be what I would say to my former self, because I just make jokes about it and muddle through, when actually you do need to call out that kind of behaviour. And where for me it was about being a young woman and having those things said to me, it could just as easily about just being the most junior person in the room, or being the youngest person in the room, or colour of your skin, your sexuality, whatever. For whatever reason somebody's doing that to you, do call it out, because especially in this day and age, you should be able to. Finally, 2 points on why we're all here tonight. My former self, I would tell her to network more. You should use things like YRP, IRO, CILT, and I didn't use them enough in my early career. I know that YRP is now supposed to be not just about age, it's supposed to be about, stage in your career, but generally speaking, there are a lot of younger people who are in this kind of arena. And honestly, you do have more time to do stuff when you're in your 20s and your early 30s. Life, work, it just gets busier the older you get. You know, you have houses, spouses, kids, busier jobs. That's just generally a fact. So in your 20s, when you do have more time and dare I say it, maybe even a bit more energy, do the networking, join everything, go for it. You will benefit from it. And the second point on it is, which I do think I've been better at from coming from a graduate community and then also moving around quite a lot of jobs, is to stick together, because the people you meet and work with in your early career will go with you and follow you through the rest of your career. And having those relationships, those people you can pick up the phone to, in my case, those people you can marry, you know, it will stand you in good stead and it will follow you through your career. So don't underestimate the power of being able to say, I remember that person, I worked with them, or I met them at an event, pick up the phone. It's not cheesy. It's the way the world works. And I think for a long time I thought it was cheesy, or it was the old boys network, or that kind of thing. Being recognised for doing a good job is great, and you should be, but it's also good to be able to just call in a favour, call in a conversation, ask a question. And the last thing I'm going to say is about asking questions. Railway people, in general, in my experience, right the way down to the person who cleans the platform in the station, all the way up to talking to Andrew Haynes, they bloody love talking about the railway. They just love it. So ask questions, and like Nina said, listen to the answers. People will love you and they will remember you for asking them questions and being interested in their world, being interested in what they do. And I genuinely think it's what made me a good people manager. When I've managed teams, I was lucky enough to have a great job managing signallers, still to this day, one of my favourite jobs. And I knew not only about what they did for a living, but I knew about their families, I knew their kids' names, I knew which football team they supported. And when I went in on a Monday morning, I knew how their football team had done on Saturday, and knew not to ask the Liverpool fans about Everton and vice versa. That stuff sounds incidental, but it's so important to people. And if you can find a way to master that, even if it's not your immediate comfort skill, you will do well, and you will enjoy work so much more as well, because like Nina said, you spend so much time at work and people are the most interesting thing about it. So why not enjoy that? I think that was everything I was going to cover, and hopefully there's enough synergy to mean that we're not giving you completely contradictory advice, Nina and I. And I would be so interested to hear some questions from you. If you guys have some for us, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was really, really good. Nina, do you mind coming up again too? We got quite a few questions. Thank you both for your really good presentation. So the first one would be, do you think senior experienced professionals should do more to share their network with upcoming professionals? And as young professionals, how may you go about approaching these individuals to help introduce you to their networks?
Do you want me to go first, Nina?
Go on, you go.
In my experience, people are surprisingly open to including you in their network through things like LinkedIn, or if you're I do quite a lot of speaking events at conferences and things. And if somebody comes and speaks to me, or a lot of the other senior people that I speak with at events, I've never seen anyone say, bugger off, you know, I don't want to speak to you. People tend to be quite open to a conversation and actually enthusiastic about a conversation. I think the fact that people like Andrew Haynes come and speak at YRP events and what have you kind of reflects that we do as an industry, I think, value speaking to the kind of the future leaders of the industry, and do recognise that as being a valuable exercise. So I think it's about having the confidence to reach out and to try and make those connections, because I think if you seek them, then you'll get a good response, would be my view.
So from my perspective, I can share a bit of personal experience with you. When I set my business up in the rail industry, which is about 7.5 years ago now, I knew nobody. I literally did not know a soul. And
now she knows everyone.
So a really great story for you, whoever's asked that question. I came into the industry, I just knew, my intuition told me that there was opportunity in the rail industry. I knew that there was change and transformation on the cards, and therefore new talent, people needed to, they will need to bring new people in. So, but I knew nobody and I knew nothing. I'd been on a train, and my great granddad was a station master in North Wales, but other than that, nothing. One of the very first people that I placed was actually a person into transport for Greater Manchester, and his referee, chap that I've never heard of, but Anna Jane just mentioned him earlier, called Ian Coucher, who had been the chief exec of Network Rail. When I phoned to take the reference, he'd moved on. He wasn't at the business any longer. But I phoned up to take the reference. Great reference, great conversation. And then he said to me, "Who are you anyway? I've never heard of you." And I said, "Well, it's funny that, because I've never heard of you either." So thankfully he laughed. And he said, "So you really don't know anything about the rail industry, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't. I've got a blank piece of paper." So he said, "If you buy me lunch, I'll tell you about it." What an amazing experience. A literally 3-hour lunch where he did this download. I don't think I ate anything. I sat there taking copious notes throughout. And when I came away from that, he gave me the names and the mobile numbers for 6 people in his network and said, "Go and phone these people, tell them that I told you that to get in touch, and tell them that I recommend that they see you." And that, for me, what an amazing opportunity, what a generous thing for Ian to do. So my that, albeit a very specific one there, is that if you are interested in other people, if you're honest, I could have told him that I knew everybody in the rail industry, but I didn't. I was really honest with him, just set my business up, just launched, just finding my feet, and he was prepared to help. And after that, literally every single person I've met in the industry has been exactly the same. I think if you put yourself out there, if you are not kind of, you don't want a hard sell, you need to get to know somebody first. And what I find is by having those conversations, by building those relationships, the introductions into their network is a natural next step for that. So there's nothing calculated in that for me. That's kind of, let's get to know somebody, and by virtue of that, you automatically extend your network further and build some really great, valuable relationships.
Thank you very much. For the next one, do you have any advice for recent starters and how to approach potential mentors?
Yeah, there's some pretty good mentor schemes now, some structured ones. So Women in Rail do one, for instance. I'd be surprised if YRP don't. The reason I say use a structured one is because I think mentoring is slightly misunderstood sometimes. And if you use a structured system, they're very good at matching you to a suitable mentor, rather than there's a difference between a mentor and just having somebody who you like having a chat with, who's got lots of experience. That's great too. There's a place for both, but mentoring is quite a specific thing. It's different to coaching. It's different to to management. It's different to lots of things. So I would personally recommend, if you're genuinely quite young in your career and a new starter, reaching out to a more formal, structured mentoring scheme. That would be my personal shout. Don't know if Nina would disagree with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I've done mentoring through Women in Rail, and currently I'm mentoring through Women in Transport scheme. And I think both of them, if I'm right, are open to men as well as women. So they're open to anybody, yeah. So although we've got obviously women in the title, then of the organisation, they are open to everybody. So I think a structured scheme is really good, because, as Anna Jane said, you're matched up to somebody, and they do that in a very specific way. But also, if you can't get access to that, then I think for me, then mentoring it can be as simple as one conversation. It can be something where you speak to somebody on a regular basis. Or it can be something that you just pick the phone up to every now and again, and it can be a really informal relationship. So I think that if you have identified somebody that you believe you could learn from, that you've got some chemistry with, that has shown some interest in you and your career, then having a conversation to say, can I buy you a coffee? I'd really love to, and we can't do that at the moment, but whatever the virtual equivalent of that is, then I'd really love to hear more about your career, tell you a bit more about mine, and I'd really love you to mentor me. And I know so many people in the industry who are actively involved with mentoring people, really senior people, you know, who you think, oh, they've got this massive job and yet they still find time to do that. So people are very generous. People in the rail industry particularly generous. They want
the other thing I would say about mentoring, which is partly why I like the structured scheme, is because certainly when I was younger in my career, I think I made this mistake, that a good mentor for you isn't necessarily someone who does what you think you want to do. So for instance, say you're a civil engineer and you want to end up as a chartered engineer and go through the kind of that route. Your best mentor might be somebody who's a commercial director or a finance director, which isn't what you want to do, but they just might have the skill set to really effectively mentor you, because often it's about discussions and questioning around not your technical discipline or your actual career path as such. It's about getting you to think differently. It's about discussing where you're going and options and all those kind of things, which is why I say mentoring is not necessarily what people think it is, though there is a place for some of those other things too, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Another question is, how would you go about discussing moving within your current company? You don't really feel comfortable with having those conversations, or you don't want to let your team down by not wanting to leave them?
I would come back to what I said earlier about the Ian Coucher thing, that it's a compliment. If you want to leave to further your career, to go on to an opportunity that's better for you, that's a compliment. I mean, as a manager, as a leader, if somebody in my team gets an opportunity, gets a promotion, yeah, my first instinct is to go, oh, damn, I'm losing a really good person. But second to that, and first really, because you should put it this way around, is wow, they've got a wonderful opportunity. That's great. I must have done something right as a leader because I've developed them and I've helped them, and somebody else wants them. That's brilliant. So I think if you see it like that, rather than the way that question was expressed was sort of quite negative about, oh, I'm letting people down, or difficult conversation, turn it round to the positive, that you're an asset that your boss is going to see as getting a great opportunity. And particularly if you move is within the company rather than leaving the company, which I think the question sounded like it is, what's there to be worried about? That's a positive conversation if you make it into one, I would say.
Thank
you. I completely agree with that.
Ollie, do you mind changing the slide?
I think that the idea of moving on, so what occurs to me there is that, in years gone by, when I looked at a CV, then you always look at the length of time that someone's been in a role. And it used to be, if somebody had moved and they'd only been in the role 5 years, it'd be like, oh, right, a bit flighty. That's not what we're looking for now. We understand that people want to get different experience, and I think if you can be with an organisation for 10 years, but if you've done a number of jobs in that time, it shows the progression. So if you are seriously about your career, then I do think you need to be looking for the next opportunity. I love what Anna Jane said earlier about being a crab. The sideways move, there is nothing wrong with the sideways move at all. It's giving you a different view, a different perspective of your organisation, of the industry. So definitely don't be obsessed with moving up. Sideways is good. It gives you some more experience. And I definitely agree with everything Anna Jane's just said. As a leader of people, it's the biggest sign of achievement that you can have, is that somebody has reached a point where they've developed to the extent that they are ready to go on to their next role. And even if it's in a different organisation, there are so many people that I meet in the course of my day job that will, they've worked for one operating company, they've gone to a different TOC, they might have gone to the DFT, they might have gone to Rail Delivery Group, and then they'll be back at a TOC again, and potentially the same one that they came from. But they've got so much more experience and knowledge than they had in the first place. So you've got to go, you've got to fly, go and get some more experience, and then you can come back.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Lorena,
just
I
realised
can't
that.
hear you. I don't know if it's just me.
Sorry. What skills are sought after in today's job market?
Nina, that's one for you.
The one standout one for me that I can tell you is not anecdotal, it's actually what clients are asking me for. And this shift has started to happen 2.5 years ago and is only gathering pace. So when I used to take a job brief, then it would be very much focused on the technical aspect of the role. So what the client is looking for from a technical perspective. And so I would have to ask the question, yeah, but what kind of person do you want? What type of personality, what character traits do you want them to have, etc. That has shifted. And the one thing, and it ties in with what I've said and with what Anna Jane's already said as well this evening, it's stakeholder engagement and management. That has risen right to the top in terms of what clients in the rail industry are looking for, because there's a huge recognition that whilst yes, the technical skills are important, as Anna Jane said, it's, you know, if you're an engineer and you're really skilled, you're a project manager, you've got great technical skills, etc., etc., it's the people stuff that is going to make you stand out. That's what's going to be the thing that takes you up another notch, another few notches in terms of your career. So in terms of the skills that employers are looking for in the rail industry, stakeholder engagement and management, people skills, leadership, and also commercial skills. So how do we make money? How do we grow revenue? How do we reduce costs? How can we be more efficient? And always good project management skills.
And related to that, someone else was asking, for technical graduates, how should they go on learning more non-technical skills? Because, you know, for example, I'm an engineer, so I'm very technical focused, so it does a bit slightly harder to go over non-technical skills.
I would say what you're doing with YRP is a really good example of where it's a bit like, you remember when you were applying for university and they would say, oh, well, as well as your A levels, you need to, you know, be a member of the debating society, or, you know, whatever it might be. Don't think of your non-technical skills as being just about in the work environment. It could be about what you're doing slightly broader than that. So getting involved in something like YRP is a really good example. There's also things like networks in your organisation. So for instance, at Network Rail, we have our employee networks. So we have like the LGBTQ one, we have the BAME network. We have, you know, a bunch of, there's things that you can get involved in that are not about your day job, and then you can sell that in an interview or an application to say, well, you know, I've worked with people from a really diverse set of backgrounds, I've brought people together, I've managed relationships, I've planned events, I've communicated with people. All those things are non-technical too, but not necessarily about your day job. And it could even be outside of work as well. You know, if you're involved in voluntary work or whatever that's not to do with your technical discipline, think about how you can sell those things in. It's one of the most annoying things for me. I love interviewing. A bit like Nina, I'm dead nosy and like learning about people. So interviewing's great because you get to ask people loads of questions and get away with it. But one of the things that frustrated me the most about interviewing people from my own team when you're doing an internal promotion, so you know the person and you know what they're about a bit, but you've got to be really neutral and you've got to take the answers that they give you. And this happened to me loads of times where I'd give somebody interview feedback and say, why didn't you tell me about like the scout troop that you manage, or the under-9s football team that you manage, or, you know, the renovation that you're doing on your house? You know, you are a project manager, or you are a leader, or you know, blah 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 blah. And it used to really frustrate me because people think you have to just talk about your job and your work, but you're so much more than that. And actually, as an individual, it's great that you're so much more than that. Nobody wants someone who can only do this very narrow thing. So I would just encourage you to think more broadly.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
One last question then. Oh, sorry, feel free to add something.
That's, yeah, I just was agreeing vociferously with what Anna Jane had said. So I think definitely the networking, definitely getting out of your comfort zone, So if you do go to a networking event, for example, or you're signing up for a webinar or, you know, some kind of online conference, then perhaps look at something that is not about your technical discipline. Go and do something else. So, you know, there was a seminar this afternoon on mental health in the railway, that kind of thing. So getting involved with stuff that is not specifically about your particular discipline. So you're learning and you're being inquisitive. And absolutely, completely agree with Anna Jane. I always ask people when I'm interviewing them, so when you're not at work, what do you do? And you'd be surprised at the number of times that people kind of are a bit shocked that I've asked them, because it's like, well, what does that matter? It matters hugely, actually, because that is part of you. You're not just your job, you're a person, and you're a really interesting person. So we like to know everything because we're nosy.
Thank you. One last question then. Anna Jane mentioned being a generalist rather than a specialist. Are there any standout qualification you would suggest for senior management, such as an MBA? And would you also suggest membership of a professional body would be necessary?
I have an MBA, so I have to say I think it's a good idea because I thoroughly enjoyed doing my MBA, and I think it's helped me to take the next step in my career. So if that opportunity arises, take it. I didn't mention it on my top tips. That's an example of, and you'll like this in the Northeast YRP group, shy Ben's getting out, and it's so true. My grandma taught me that because I only got to do my MBA because I asked. So I just asked, and they said, yeah, go on then. Simple as that. So as well as saying yes and thinking later, just shy Ben's getting out. But yeah, so I'm a specialist generalist. That's what we like to call ourselves nowadays, because actually it's nothing to be ashamed of being a generalist. It is a thing in itself, and having a breadth of knowledge and experience across, particularly an industry like ours, is a skill in itself. So first of all, don't be ashamed to be a generalist. It's not a dirty word, it's a good thing. But yeah, I would say if an MBA opportunity presents itself, do it. It's a lot of work, but I loved it. Does everybody understand what it is and get it? No. So you will find quite a lot of time you're explaining to people, particularly the old guard, who don't really get it, but that's fine. And yeah, professional associations are good too. So again, confession from me, I've not been that good on it, but I'm trying to get more involved with CILT. That's quite a good one. So I'm a fellow of CILT, but I haven't done much with it. I probably should. I think there's probably quite a lot of networking opportunities there and knowledge to be gained from the wider transport industry. So us generalists should do a lot more of that, I think.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you both for speaking to us tonight. And if you would have any closing remarks to add, that will be the time.
Thank you for having us. And if you're not already involved in Women in Rail, this is my time to plug. Get involved. We're trying to do a lot of stuff together with YRP. So I think it works really well for us to work together, and hopefully we'll do lots more of that in the future.
Definitely, we are up for collaborations.
And I definitely second that. As Anna Jane said, I'm involved with Women in Rail in the Northwest. We are looking forward very much to restarting our events programme and getting people together. We've had some great events over the last few months, really well attended, and it's been brilliant to meet people, which is one of my favourite things to do. Huge thanks to YRP Northeast for inviting me to speak. I hope that there have been some pearls of wisdom in there somewhere, and as always, I've loved listening to Anna Jane. I absolutely love listening. It's always interesting. I love the accent for a start, but I've taken loads of notes, so thank you to you as well.
Likewise, and thank you, Nina. Lovely to see you as ever.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody attending. If you do find it really interesting, then I hope you'll join the next session, which is in a week's time. And maybe get even more involved in YRP, maybe join our committee, help us organize future events, and that's it. Really, have a good evening, and thank you very much to everybody.